Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of EverydayFI, the podcast that explores the stories of everyday folks on the path to financial independence. I'm your host, Megan Combs, and join me today as I talk to Carl and Carla. We have a candid conversation about how to talk to your family and partner about money, how Carla's parents' divorce and 2008 financial disaster influenced her philosophies as an adult, and how Carl hiked the PCT within the first 2 months of their marriage. You'll learn a lot about their journey, like how Carla bought a house while only making $8.50 an hour, what they think about moving in with a partner, and how to contend with the numerous options life holds for all of us. Tune in to hear their story. Hey, Carl and Carla. I love that your names are basically the same, and I'm really happy you guys are joining me today. How are you? Why don't you introduce yourself? Carla, feel free to go first.
I'm Carla. I'm 35 years old. We are from Cleveland, Georgia, which is the beginning of the Appalachians. And we have 3 children. I have 2 from a previous relationship. Carl and I have been married for 5 years.
Nice. Carl, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Carl. I am married to Carla, like she said. I joined her beautiful family 5 years ago. And like she said, we have two stepdaughters, and then we have a son who is 2. And I am a veterinarian here in Cleveland, Georgia.
Oh, that's amazing. And Carla, what did you say you did?
I'm actually a stay-at-home mom now, but before that, I worked at the elementary school as a library clerk.
Nice. Ooh, library science. I love that. Okay, cool. And so you live in Cleveland, Georgia, which I didn't know existed. And I almost said Ohio. That's amazing. So when did you guys blend your family together? And how was that? How did that happen? I'd love to hear more about that story, and feel free, either of you, to answer.
We started dating a little over 10 years ago. I was in between jobs and worked at the vet office, and I met Carl. And it's kind of funny. He was like, "Oh, your name's Carla? I'm just going to call you Carl A." And he loved to hike. He had already told me they went on the Appalachian Trail. And then I was like, "Oh, let's go hiking." He's like, "You want to go on a night hike?" And I was like, "Yeah." And so we kind of started hiking and hanging out. And at the time, I had already bought my house, and I was living about 10 miles away from the veterinarian office and working and being a single mom. After about 3 months of working at the vet office, I decided to go back to childcare, or because it was just a better fit for me. And he asked me out on a date. And from then on, we started dating. He came to my 25th birthday party, and my whole family was there. And after that, we started dating.
That's amazing. Carl, do you have anything to add to that story? Why did you call her Carl with an A? What intrigued you about that besides the fact that you had the same name?
I don't know. I mean, she was just the sweetest, cutest thing. And she just happened to have my name. It was like a sign.
I love that so much. And I love that you guys called this your blended family. So do your daughters live with you, or do they live with the father, or how does that work?
They live with us except every other weekend. The summertime's kind of weird. We kind of go back and forth, but for the majority, they're with us besides every other weekend.
That's awesome. And they're 13 and 11, and you have a 2-year-old boy. And so how would you say, are you introducing like any money topics to them now that they're, the 13-year-old is probably getting to a point where she knows about money, might want to spend some money on things, maybe the 11-year-old as well, the 2-year-old probably not at all, but are you introducing any money topics, and how?
We are. We probably talk about money way more than the average family. I am always like, "Okay, we got to put money in your savings account so you can buy a car." We live in a very rural area, and we're 15 minutes from town. So it's very important for a 16-year-old to get a car. They're starting to get in sports, and my oldest plays softball and the other one plays soccer, and we're doing travel ball. And we talk about how expensive the world is. And if you don't save, then you will always be behind. Living in your means is very important in our family.
Yeah, it's very important in general, right? Would you say the philosophies of money that you're teaching your kids are the same between the two of you, or do you differ in any respects?
They're I will tell you, it is a lot easier to work with somebody that you're married to and living with about money. I would say 90% of the time we're on the same page with everything about money. Sometimes we have some hiccups, but we usually work through them before they get to be a main concern.
Do you have any advice for people who are trying to teach their kids about money and are doing it with a partner? Either of you, Carl or Carla?
Be very open. I think that's a lot of times parents are not open with their kids and they need to know how much life costs. We kind of shelter them because we're their parents, but I've learned that my girls understand a lot more when I'm very open about what the expectations are. Like, you're not getting a brand new car when you turn 16. Sorry.
I would say it's very important to be open with your spouse from the get-go. Even before Carla and I got married, we were already talking about our finances. And I feel like that was a very important step. And that's made our money journey a lot easier.
Yeah, I'd like you to say more about that. What kind of things were you talking about in the beginning? And then why was that so important to you, Carl?
So another reason I liked her, other than her sweetness and cuteness, was that she was already really good with money. She didn't make very much, but she made really good decisions. She was able to buy her house. She bought a foreclosure and fix it up very nice on a very low budget. And I was impressed with that. And I am already a very frugal person. And so that just really appealed to me. And I felt like we were already on a good foot there.
Yeah, that makes sense that your values seem to align, especially when it came to money. And I think that's can be very important. And I love that you guys are setting this example for our audience here and your kids for, being open and discussing money, because I feel like that, first of all, is one of the number one reasons for divorce, right? Is financial infidelity and financial miscommunication. And so I love that you guys did that from the get-go. I love to tell the story that when I was still dating, I've been with my partner for over 3 years now, but when I was still dating, there was one guy that I was really interested in. And I think it was like week 2 of us going on several dates that I came out about being part of the financial independence movement. And then he ghosted me and then I remember people in the financial independence movement saying, well, maybe you shouldn't have told him that you're basically in a cult at the very beginning. But I disagree. I think being honest up front kind of saved me a lot of potential heartbreak, because if he decided that he didn't want to talk about money like that, like he had that visceral of a reaction, I probably dodged a bullet. So I love that you guys talked about money in the beginning. And there's so much here that I want to talk about. So first, Carl, I want to know if there's anything different from what Carla said that you're teaching your kids about money. And then Carla, I want to hear about how you bought a house on such a low salary. So Carl, feel free to start us off.
I don't think there's anything different I'm teaching them about money. I have tried to kind of let them know that every dollar you spend represents a piece of your time. And I've tried to just kind of say things in line with that throughout our time together. And sometimes it goes over well, and sometimes it really doesn't. Sometimes they look at me as a cheapskate, and I worry that may traumatize them at times. But I think all in all, that message is going to set in.
That makes sense. Do you have an example of when they've looked at you like a cheapskate when you were telling them something?
Carla, are there any good examples you can think of?
Just this past summer, we went on vacation and they were upset with us because we got a 1-bedroom condo and they had to sleep on the pull-out couch. They're like, we want our own room. And we're like, it's time. And they're like, you're just too cheap.
Well, the problem is Carl is the one who booked that condo. I had nothing to do with it. But of course, it's all on me somehow.
Yeah, well, sometimes there's always that one parent who everybody blames for everything, right? That's funny. Cool. Well, Carla, okay, so I want to hear about how you bought your house on a low salary. Like, go into how you found the foreclosure, how you were able to save money on the renovations, and if you're willing to share like what your salary was at the time when you did all of this and how much you bought the house for, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, it was 11 years ago. And in the area, there was a lot of foreclosures. I decided that I didn't want to pay rent. And I started looking, and I was actually working at the daycare that my kids went to. So I get free daycare. And I was actually making $8.50 an hour. And I went to the bank with my stepdad, and they were like, "There's no way. She's not getting a mortgage. Sorry." And I was like, "Oh, man, that's a bummer." But one of the kids at the daycare's mom was a loan officer at a smaller just mortgage company. And I went in there and she's like, we'll get pre-approved you for 60,000. And I said, "Okay." So the hunt was on, and I went and looked, and I went to some dumps. And I saw this one. We actually still live here in the house that I bought. And
Oh,
yeah.
I know the audience can't see it, but I can see because we're on camera right now and it's beautiful. So it doesn't look like a dump at all.
No, it was actually a 4-bedroom, 2-bath house that was built in '07, and I bought it in '13. The people lived there for about a year and a half and foreclosed on it, so it had sat for a couple of years, and there was some sheetrock damage, and all that kind of stuff. But no, I mean, it was kinda crazy. So, I got it pre-approved. I bought the house for 50,000, but I borrowed 57,000, and with that $7,000, I got as much as I could fixed. And then we've added a garage, and Carl has a man attic now and turned one of the bedrooms into a bathroom, so our oldest daughter has her own bathroom. And, we've just done stuff throughout the 11 years that we've lived here. But yeah, when I got my first mortgage payment, it was 428 $428. So with
Oh my God. I'm sorry for interrupting, but wow. Like I would kill for that mortgage payment. And I'm sure a lot of people in the audience are like, oh my God, that's a dream. Do you still have a mortgage on it now or did you pay it off?
we do. We actually bought a rental house. And when we bought the rental house, we combined the two. So now our rental house, the rent pays the mortgage on both houses.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yep. So we do have that. And we also bought the 5 acres next to us. So we're actually on 6 acres.
Nice. So, Carl, when you met her, Carla, you already owned the property, correct? And Carl, did you own anything at the time?
I owned nothing except a truck.
Nice. Okay. So you were happy to move into her place.
Well, I didn't move in right
Okay.
away. We
Okay.
dated for a couple of years. So I was renting a house closer to my work, which, I mean, was just a few minutes away from her. And I did not move in with her for another year and a half, which is another story. We dated for a year, and then I took off on a trail and hiked for 5 months, and then came back, and that's when I moved in with her.
Oh, that's awesome. Which trail did you do?
So I did the Pacific Crest Trail from Mexico to Canada. That's one of my little mini retirement sabbatical things that I took when I was getting a little burnout from my job. And it was nice to come home and back to Cleveland and continue my relationship with Carla. That was good.
That's amazing. But it sounds like you guys took kind of a break for 5 months. Carla, how did you feel about him going on this really extended trip and having to take that break when you kind of were just starting this relationship?
It was interesting. I had always put myself as a mother first. I think that's why me and Carl got along so well, because it was like, my job is to be a mom, and every other weekend we can hang out. Our relationship started really slow. He was 29 and I was 25, and we were just kind of doing our things, and then get together and hang out and went on some adventures. I always called my adventure boyfriend before we were married. And he told me he was going on this hike on Valentine's Day after we had been dating for almost a year. And I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, do you plan on coming back?" Because that was a big thing to me, because he didn't have anything tying him here. He's not from here. I'm from here. Both my parents went to high school here. I worked at the elementary school I went to as a kid. So I was very small town girl, and he was from about 4 hours away. So I wasn't sure if he would come back to this area, which was for me to know if the relationship was going to go anywhere after that. But we did. We kept in contact and we talked during the whole 5 months. I think the longest time I didn't talk to him was 2 weeks. And when he came back, it was just kind of understanding that he was going to come stay with me for a couple weeks, and he never left. He got his old job back, and he just stayed here.
I love that he was just supposed to stay with you and just never left. I guess it worked out, right? So you went and stayed with her for 2 weeks after you got back from your extended 5-month hike on the PCT, and you just stayed forever. Did you have any sort of discussions about moving in, or did you just decide to live together? Like, how did that work? And would you, I guess, repeat that today with what you know from what you learned from that experience?
Yes, I know it would be, up for debate with how people would want to live their lifestyle, but I would do it the same way. I would recommend that. I came back and it was clear that I still love Carla, and I had to come back actually for a court case with my work. And it was 2 reasons I came back, one for her, one for court case. And then I just decided I wanted to stay, and my job offered me a better position, and so it just happened. And moving in together was a very good move.
Awesome. I did make him pay rent.
I mean, yeah. My partner lives with me. I own the house. He's not on the deed. We're not married. He pays me rent, right? So
that's how we do it.
Yeah. And I would recommend that to anybody out there who's moving in together. We also had I forget exactly what kind of agreement it is. It's not a roommate agreement. It's like a partnership living together agreement. It's called something, but I forget. And it's a little bit more involved than a renter's agreement, but it definitely stipulates like, this is mine, this is yours, this is what you're covering, this is, whatever. It's just a nice agreement to have. And I've seen relationships before that didn't have that, and it went sideways really fast. And so that's why I was asking you about it, because I've seen it happen where I know a couple where the guy was just staying with the woman who owned the house, and he just never left, but it actually turned really bad because she started to become resentful, and like they never talked about anything, and like, but it sounds like everything really worked out really well for you. So that's one of the reasons why I was asking. I was like, okay, so this sounds like an example where it worked out great. And so it just goes to show that every relationship is different.
That's where it was very important to have already been talking about money. And so it was very clear when I came in that I was to take over a good chunk of the bills.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. All right. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, that PCT trip sounds really fun. Not for me. I'm not a camper, but for some people in the audience, it sounds like it might be fun. Cool. Okay. So what I want to do next is dive into each of your money backgrounds and money stories from like childhood on, because, we were talking about how you guys talk to your kids about money. And so I'd love to hear like how your backgrounds may have influenced that. So Carla, let's start with you. What's one of your earliest money memories?
One of my earliest money memories is probably what a lot of millennials have. My dad would collect a jar of change and he would dump it in the floor, and we had to categorize it and then put it in the little sleeves and then take it to the bank, because the bank didn't count, or you didn't have the thing where you just threw the money in and it counted your coins for you. Another money memory is going to the banks with my parents a lot. They were business owners, so we were at the bank at least twice a week, just making deposits, doing, of course, balancing their checkbook. It was they never talked about money or like what class or what we had or what we didn't have, but it was something that they did distill, that we need to save money. We needed to, it takes money to live. But in 2008, I was 19 and my parents lost everything, and they got divorced during that time. So that was a big money awareness. I think that's where my frugalness comes from, because we went from normal middle class to, sorry, you're out on your own. We can't even, we can't do anything and we're getting a divorce. So it was kind of a little bit traumatic. That's probably my youngest memories.
Yeah. And what kind of business were your parents in?
So when I was younger, my dad built houses. He built spec homes for a subdivision. He actually bought 20 acres and we lived at the first house, and then he built about 6 or 7 houses. And then when I got a little bit older, he started doing foundations, basements, and slabs and stuff for residential houses. And at one time, my mom owned a tanning salon, and one time we owned a video store, not Blockbuster, but actually Movie Gallery bought us out when I was in 8th grade. So I had like 5,000 movies. It was, everybody wanted to be my friend because I got the movies before they even came out. So I spent a lot of holidays returning movies and Be Kind, Rewind. And like I said, my dad was doing foundation work with residentials, and then 2008 happened and pretty much everything stopped. And they lost the house we grew up in, and they ended up separating and getting divorced.
And do you think that the divorce was because they lost everything?
I think it was due to money, just different aspects on money, and just their kids were kind of older, so it was kind of like they wanted to go their separate ways. I think there had been some issues a little bit before, but when all that happened, they decided to go separate ways.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I'm really sorry that happened. And that's one thing that a lot of millennials have scars from is the 2008 crisis, because they saw their parents lose everything. And I can see why the financial independence movement kind of grew out of that frugality that we all have is one of those, we saw the cautionary tale play out in real life. And so we took that to heart and we were like, okay, well, if I save 50, 60, 70% of my income, this can never happen to me, kind of deal. At least that was, I luckily, my parents didn't lose anything, but I graduated college in 2009, which was when the lowest part of the market was happening, right? And I just could not get a job and had to live with my family. And it was so hard. And having to be dependent on others at that time, especially when all you want as a 22-year-old is to be independent, it's difficult. So yeah, I'm really sorry that happened, but thank you so much for sharing. And also thank you for the nostalgia, because I was definitely thinking of the big jugs of like coins that are like right next to the door and you just throw your coins in there. We had one of those too. And then when it would get full, we would like dump it all over the ground. And then movie gallery, we had a movie gallery too. And I'm like, oh my God, do those even exist anymore? Probably not. But yeah, thank you for the nostalgia. That's amazing. All right, Carl, your turn. What's one of your earliest money memories?
One of my earliest money memories is when I got my first wallet. It was a Velcro camouflage wallet from Ducks Unlimited that my dad took me to a festival and I somehow obtained it. And I was so proud of it that I went home and I made money with paper and drew little numerics on them, and I stuffed my wallet with the money and I carried it around. But beyond that, it's more normal stuff. I remember rolling the coins just like Carla, and then my money story from there was pretty good. I mean, I had a great childhood. My parents were very educated. My dad's a dentist. My mother taught nursing school. And it was just normal things. They didn't drive any specifics into us, just platitudes like live within your means and buy low, sell high, income producing property, but never any specific lessons to us. They valued education above everything else. We were taught, go to college, get the best career you can, and then the rest will play out.
That's interesting. Did your parents encourage you to take out student loans to go to school, or were they able to help you pay for school, or did you get scholarships?
I got a lot of scholarships, but they also did pay for my undergraduate. I was very fortunate. We were expected to go to grad school and we did not pay for grad school. So, but I was very fortunate that they helped me out so much. Most people do not get that.
He did get student loans.
Okay, yeah,
He did get student loans for grad school.
Yeah, because I mean, veterinary school is probably very expensive, right? And are you still paying on those loans, or did you decide to pay them off, or what's your philosophy around your student loans?
My philosophy has changed. I definitely think you should pay them off very quickly. I recently paid them off this past year.
Congratulations. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, originally when I graduated from veterinary school, I put it on the back burner because I felt like paying them off was less money in the bank for me to, in case my job failed and I had to leave, I needed something in the bank to pretty much FU money if something were to happen. But looking back on it, I should have been more aggressive from the beginning.
And why do you feel like you should have been more aggressive? What was the interest rate at? Do you remember?
6.8. I
Okay.
feel like that's pretty high. And I wish I had paid more sooner.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's something that we all kind of contend with because 6.8 is like right on that cusp of, should I be in the market or should I pay this off? Like, is this a hair on fire loan or is it not? I always struggled with that with my own student loans. And so I decided to refinance them down to a lower interest rate so then I didn't have to worry about it anymore and I could just like pay them as I wanted to. But it's funny, Carl, I see a lot of my own story in yours. It's so funny how many people come on this podcast. I'm like, yep, me too. And my father was very much about education is the pinnacle of what makes society what it is. He dubs himself a professional student. And he majored in psychology, then became a lawyer, and then became a nurse, and then became a teacher. Like he's done everything. And so he definitely put college and grad school on a pedestal. But unfortunately, he was not able to help me. So I took out the maximum amount of loans and lived on them in New York City. And so I did all the wrong things. And I'm not even using my degree anymore. So it's funny that I see myself in you because like I was expected to go to grad school, but then I had to pay for it myself because grad school in New York City was very expensive. But unfortunately, I'm not using my degree like you are. So at least yours, you're able to be a vet with it. So Carla, you mentioned that your parents didn't really talk about money, but what do you think was most important to them when it came to money? Was it debt payoff? Was it savings? Was it reinvesting in their business? Was it investing, period? Was it buying pretty cars and big houses?
They were, so I think this is just my seeing it. A lot changed, like I said, after I was a grown up. But when I was a kid, it was my mom wanted the nicer house, the nicer stuff, the nicer car. She leased her car. My dad drove the work truck, kind of more humble, provide for your family first kind of thing. And he made the money and we had a great life. She stayed at home half the time. Like I said, she did I call it like little side businesses, like the video store stuff. I mean, you still had to work, but like she could be at all our events. And my dad was the one that worked to provide most of the money. Money was kind of stressed at sometimes. My dad had a couple medical things that happened throughout my childhood. And it would be like we were really doing well, I could tell. And then he would be hospitalized for a couple weeks and it was crisis mode. But of course, my parents did a really good job trying to, we still had Christmas, even though he was in the hospital. Everything looked from the outside like everything was okay. But I do know it caused some family stress and some money stress.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Yeah, that sounds challenging. And it sounds like there's a lot of parallels between how you live, with the way that your mom stayed home sometimes and the way that you want to stay home and that you think like being a mother is the number one priority for you. It sounds like your mom was similar and wanted to give you guys a good life and did that by spending. But it's interesting that you are wanting to give a good life by showing your kids that the frugal way is the real way. And you took what your mom taught you and your dad taught you and made it your own. And I always love that about money stories and how you can see that there's some influences, but there's also changes that we can make as an adult. And you've done that beautifully, Carla. So, Carl, same question. And for you, I wonder if you've ever overheard your parents talking about money with each other or with anybody else in the family, or how did they talk about money with you, if you remember?
I never really heard them arguing much about money. And like I said, they would say money doesn't grow on trees when we be at the store and they can't get the huge bag of candy, things like that. I think the biggest thing was when my dad bought a used bass boat and brought it home without talking to my mother. And I think that was the only time that I ever really heard them arguing about money. But that bass boat ended up being a great, quote unquote, investment for our life. But not like Carla. I really didn't have any major events that stood out to me about money with my parents.
Okay. And so with the bass boat, what did your mom take issue with the most? Do you remember that conversation?
It was that he did not tell her he was going to do it. But I think that was the biggest thing because I think back then, let's see, what that would have been in 90, 98, 99. I think it was $10,000. So it was a big chunk. I just remember the look on her face when we walked in and told her to look out the window, and it was not a happy face.
Yeah. And the reason why I ask is it makes me wonder why your father might have purchased this without talking to her. Do you have an inkling of why that might have been?
I think it's because he knew she would probably say no. And I think I was becoming that age where he really wanted to take me out on this boat a lot. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure why he did it, but it's just the only thing that stood out to me.
Yeah, no, that makes sense though, that it's what you said there, that she probably would have said no, but he wanted to get it because he wanted to build memories with you. And you even said that it was one of the best investments in your childhood kind of memories and happiness for the family. So it's interesting that even though it was a decision made that was one-sided, it still proved to provide dividends of happiness for the whole family. So it's just very interesting to me because a lot of times things like that go very black and white, where it's like, oh, this decision was a very poor decision and it made the money situation more stressful, but it actually went the opposite way. So I love that. And I love that things in life are so different depending on who's making the decisions and who's not. So thank you for sharing that. And I guess my other question is, did you get a sense for what kind of prioritization they had around money? The same question that I had for Carla. Did they prioritize saving, spending, investing, things like that? Did you get a sense for that kind of thing?
Yes, they prioritize saving and investing and also giving. They were very big givers and still are. And so that was another lesson they did try to teach us is to give. One I wish I could do more of, and I'm working on that. But that's where they focused on, was giving and investing.
That's amazing. What kind of things did they give to, and do you know how much they gave?
I do believe they were giving at least 10% of their gross income to their church, donating to the Scouts and other organizations. They were constantly writing checks.
That's incredible. Your parents sound like amazing people and like really great parents to have. So you're very lucky. And I'm curious if you were able, I know you said you wanted to work on giving more. Where would you want to give if you could give more? And how much would you want to give?
I would like to give a lot more to outdoor and nature projects, such as the scenic trail systems, the local trail clubs. That's where I'd like to focus a lot of my time and energy and money here in the future.
Oh, that's great. It's something that one of my previous guests talked about, volunteering for maintaining the trails in his area. And so I was wondering, is that something that you've considered doing since you're a big hiking and outdoorsy buff?
Yes, that is especially something in financial independence I would like to get much more involved with, especially in our local trail clubs.
What kind of local trail clubs do you have? I'm wondering if some of our audience members might live in the same area as you and might want to get involved. And I'd love to link that in the show notes if you know of any.
Georgia Appalachian Trail Club is the one that
Yeah.
comes to mind, and that's our local AT club.
Yeah, the AT Club. Okay. I will put that in the show notes because I don't think I've even heard of that. And my boyfriend is a huge outdoorsy backpacker, climber. Carla, is there anything that you would like to give your money or your time to, either now or in the future?
I would like to be more involved in our community. Right now, we're kind of in the messy middle, I would say. Like these kids just keep me busy constantly. And I would love to go eventually on a mission trip out of the country to help others or even in country. I think we forget that there's a lot of poverty and stuff like that that normally we don't see. I worked for Head Start for a while, which is low income, and it will really touch your heart, and I would like to help out more in that way. I do want to help out with nature, plant more trees and save the bees and stuff like that. But Carl's more the nature person, and I'm probably more of the motherly instincts of helping all the little kids.
Are you ready to take control of your financial future? Do you want to learn how to set powerful goals and invest wisely? Have you been yearning to quit your 9-to-5? Then my workbook, Your Journey to Freedom, is for you. This workbook is your roadmap to financial success. Whether you're a seasoned investor or just starting out, it's designed to help you define your goals, create a plan, and take action towards building wealth. Inside, you'll find practical exercises and tools that will help you identify your short, medium, and long-term financial goals, develop a personalized investment strategy tailored to these goals and your risk tolerance, track your progress and stay accountable to your financial objectives. Plus, there's bonus content like a quiz to test what you learn and a budget worksheet. With easy-to-follow instructions and insightful prompts, this workbook will empower you to make confident decisions and stay focused on your financial journey. Don't let another day go by without taking charge of your financial life. Invest in yourself and your future with the Your Journey to Freedom workbook. Order now and start turning your dreams into reality. Visit my website at everyday-fi.com/guides to get your copy today and start your journey to financial freedom. I'm curious how you found the financial independence world and what drew you to it.
So I first started hearing about financial independence through Clark Howard when I was graduating from veterinary school. One of my clinicians at school, off topic was like, Carl, you know that when you get out of here, no one's looking out for you but you. And if you put $5,000 in an IRA every year in 20 years, you'll be a rich man. And that was it. I feel like that was the most specific thing I'd ever heard from anybody. And so when I graduated, I started specifically listening to Clark Howard because he was on the local radio station. And he had mentioned the FIRE movement in particular, but he explained it more like the Mr. Money Mustache version of it, where these people are saving every penny they can, and so they can quit working in 10 years. And so I wasn't really down for that, but that is the first time I ever heard of that. But as I started working as a veterinarian, I was in mixed animal practice. It was great. I loved it, but it was very stressful. And I started getting burned out pretty quick. And so I started looking for other means to potentially make income. So I started looking at like online trading academy, things like that, because in the situation I was in, I felt like I could not continue on this road at the pace I'm going for too much longer. And so that's where that first trail that we mentioned came in. I started basically saving money to take a sabbatical, so to speak. And I wasn't really saving in that IRA that clinician had told me to. I saved very little in that and mostly just saved in the savings account. But when I was able to leave my job and do the hikes, it was such a relief. So that was the beginning of thinking about being financially independent, but it was just not quite correct. I should have been investing more instead of just saving more.
I'm curious, two points. Why were you only saving in a savings account, and why didn't you invest in the IRA at first?
Because I was still young and retirement still just seemed so far away, even though that really wasn't that long ago. Now, I guess it felt like that investment money was untouchable, and I needed tangible money that I can grab and live off of at any moment. And so that's the way I thought about it.
And why do you think you had that desire to have that tangible money? Like, what kind of feelings were driving that need to have the cash versus the inaccessible IRA money?
I guess because the burnout on my job was so high that I needed to be able to leave if I needed to for a good chunk of time. And the IRA, you would not be able to take that money back. I mean, Roth, you can, but I didn't understand all that then. And so that was why that was my thinking back then. I didn't have a good grasp on truly what financial independence could be and like living off the 4%. I did not fully understand that. And if I had those concepts a little more solidified, I would have probably done things a little differently.
Yeah, but we all know what we know in the moment, and we're trying to make the best decisions we can, right? It's so easy to look back and be like, oh, I would have done things different. But it's interesting because you really wouldn't have, because you wouldn't have known what you know now if you hadn't have made the mistakes that you made back then. So it's really actually good that you made the mistakes that you did so that you could learn what you know now and then change your course. So that's how I look at it, at least from my own perspective. It's that whole hindsight's 2020 type of thing. I am curious, like, why, when you heard Clark Howard talking about financial independence and the retire early aspect, why that didn't really click with you. I'm very curious about that, because that's usually what draws most people to the movement, right? And so I'm curious why that kind of pushed you away.
Mostly because even though it was retire early, it seemed very far away. So 10 years even seemed really far away at the job I was at. It was very daunting. The late nights and on call was very daunting to me. And I still at that point could not foresee myself pushing through to the end of even that chunk of time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, it's kind of sounds like young Carl was a live in the moment type. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah. As a lot of us are in our 20s, right? Because we just want everything to be available right now versus who cares about our 65-year-old self. So Carla, same question. Like, how did you find the financial independence movement and what drew you to it? And was it with Carl that you found it, or did you all find it separately and then come together and kind of combine your life with it?
Well, he is the one that found it, and he started listening to Clark Howard. And then I kind of went down when he started bringing things up, I was more of a Dave Ramsey person. Like, no debt. We got to get rid of this debt. We got to be debt free. So when he was talking about he wanted to go on all these hikes and stuff, I'm like, well, the best way to do that is to make it where we can live off nothing. And so I was like more listening to the baby steps. And I remember being in the car, and because back then that was one of the main things, that this was only like 6 years ago. I'd be like, well, listen to this, listen to these people. And he's like, well, I don't want to pay off my student loan. I want freedom now, kind of thing. And I want to do these hikes now. And I need to save up this money now. I'm like, okay. So, and we still go back and forth on that. Sometimes I'm more the tendency of, I want to pay everything off. And he's like, no, we got to invest it. Time in the market. And I'm like, but if we don't have these bills, we'll have more money. We go back and forth sometimes, which is still funny because I know in my head we should be investing, but sometimes I guess the panic mode of, if you don't owe anybody anything, they can't take it away, comes back into my DNA, I guess, or I don't know how you explain it. And he is very more like, I am a more future thinker, and like I prepare for everything. Like before we even got married, each child had a savings account for their car. And every time for birthdays and Christmases, if my dad gave me money or my grandmother gave me money, I put it into that savings account for that child. And when we first got married and we started getting in deeper to our financial, it was, well, why are you saving per child? Why can't it just be our one big savings account? And because for so long, I didn't even have enough money. I was living paycheck to paycheck pretty much until we got married. But of course, and I knew I would never make a lot of money. So then he got me to listen to Choose FI, and I kind of went crazy with it. Like I was pushing it more than he was at some points in our relationship, and still to now. Like I'm the one that does the napkin math all the time. It's all over our house. There's little pieces of paper with numbers everywhere. Our numbers, our future numbers, 5 years from now, if we do this is where we will be. If we do this, this is where we will be. When will the things be paid off? And then I started getting into real estate. And then I was big about, we bought a house and turned it into an Airbnb right during COVID. And we sold that house. But I mean, we can go in debt later about it. And then we sold it. And then we bought the 5 acres. And then we bought a single home, whatever. And that's been kind of my like niche, because I knew I would never make that much money. That owning your own business mentality's in me, but I'm not willing to take the risk of owning your own business.
Yeah. So there's a lot there. So it sounds like you are much more, we need to look to the future and we need to save for that future. And almost to the point where you sacrifice a little bit of the now to make sure your future selves are happy. Whereas Carl is like, no, our now selves need to be happy because who knows what's going to happen in the future, which is probably really good, even though it sounds like, okay, you guys are opposites, so it might cause problems. But would you find that your relationship is a push and pull, and so you guys come into the middle and make some compromises, would you say?
Well, it's kind of changed since we've had our son. So until we had our son, I think Carl was all about the now, but the future it's changed a little bit because before we had Felton, our 2-year-old, it was more like saving up for a trail or saving up for experience. Like I said, we were married for a month or 2 months, and he took off for 5 months to go on a hike again. So but once we had Felton, it was kind of like, all right, I need to be a little bit more stable. We need to look in, like, 6 or 7 years or 10 years, or what are we going to be doing when he's in middle school or high school? It's not all about what we're doing right now.
Carla is correct. She is a much more future thinker, and I am a more in the near future thinker. So when I came to live with her, I lived with her for about 3 years, and then I proposed to her and asked her to marry me, but at the same time that I was going to be doing a third trail, the Continental Divide Trail. And so, that was in there. It's not like I, married her and then took off. It was definitely in the plan. So when I came back after that, that is when we really started looking into the future. Like we have to have a more sustainable way to be able to be financially independent. And so that's when I found Choose FI in particular. And they turned what I'd learned from Clark Howard into a much more feasible thing. Brad's story, he kind of laid it out there on how much he had saved per month. And then after this many years, he was looking pretty good. And so I don't know, just the way Brad and Jonathan had described it just seemed much more attainable. And so that really put us on our journey for financial independence. And so we do owe a lot to them.
Yeah, I think this whole community owes so much to Brad and Jonathan, myself included. And so this is the weekly shout out to Choose FI, which I think we mention on every single episode because I think everybody's listening to them. So would you say that you guys made some compromises though, like, invest and pay off debt rather than just like focusing on one or the other? Or do you have like a period of time where you pay off debt and then switch to investing? Like, how do you kind of reconcile the differences between what goals you both have?
We actually, after his student loans were paid off, we just have our house payment and my car loan, which is at a 1.9 interest rate. And we knew going into it that we were not going to pay it off early because the money can do way better somewhere else. So actually at this moment, we are just paying our mortgage, paying the car payment, and our living expenses, and the rest we are investing.
And so how do you feel about having that debt, Carla, especially being somebody who was a big part of the Dave Ramsey crowd?
I would say that some days I come home and was like, we got to pay off the car. And he's like, what are you talking about? We knew buying the car, we weren't going to pay it off. And I'm like, oh, it's just bothering me. I've never had a car payment until this car. So that has been a big thing for me. But I wanted the car. I wanted it so bad, especially when I found out I was pregnant with our child. I was like, I need something bigger. I bought a minivan, bought a brand new minivan. Very practical, but I still, and now it's been 2 years and I'm like, oh, we got to get rid of it. We got to get rid of it or we got to pay it off. I can't stand having a car payment. It's killing me inside. I'm not working. I'm not able to pay this bill. We got to get rid of it. But then I think, and I'm like, I do my little napkin math, and I'm like, no, just do the payment plan. The money is doing better somewhere else. So it's a like really inner fight that I have to have with myself not to pay everything off.
I feel like we're a little ADD when it comes to the intricacies of what we're deciding to do. So I feel like the big picture is we try to max out the retirement accounts, the 401k and the Roths. And then if we're fortunate enough to do that, after that, then it's kind of a battle of where those next dollars go. And sometimes we feel like we need to pay a little more towards the house. But I feel like big picture, we have the same goals. It's not really a fight there. The student loan, we're fortunate enough to get that paid off pretty quick. I mean, it was kind of a high interest. And so there was really no argument there. The biggest argument was buying that van in the first place. I mean, I was down for keeping the vehicle we had, but with the child on the way, we definitely made that choice. And that car loan is perfectly fine because it is not the loan that's the problem. It's the fact that we decided to buy the van to begin with, if that makes sense. We use that money that we could have paid the car off and bought the rental house. So that's my spiel on that.
But have you found that the minivan has improved your quality of life at all? Like, was it worth purchasing in the end?
Yes, it was. I do not regret buying that van at all.
And so and the reason why I ask that is because, emotion cannot be disconnected from money. It just can't. It's not how human beings work. And I love, Carla, that you're like, I did the back of the napkin math. And that is what helped me realize that it's okay, we can do this. But you still have that fear, because I think you mentioned earlier that if you don't owe anything, nobody can take it away from you. And to me, I can see why you think that, because your parents had everything taken from them, their businesses, their marriage. And so I can see why those emotions are so strong for you. And I do commend you that, doing a little bit of math kind of calms you down a little bit. But I think if you also were to focus on the fact that this purchase has improved your quality of life quite substantially, that could also maybe help quell those feelings a little bit once they come up. Because I'm with you. I've done the same thing where, like, I bought the house that I'm in now, and I am not somebody who thinks like buying a primary home is necessarily an investment unless you do it the way you did, Carla. I did not do it like that. My mortgage is $2,000 a month, so it's very expensive. And it was probably a little bit out of reach for me, but I wanted the house so much, just like you wanted the minivan. And this house has improved my quality of life so much. I am outdoors all the time because I have this beautiful garden that I love to work in. Every time I come home, I walk in the door and I'm just like, but the other side of it is like, oh my God, this house is so expensive. And I would be so much further ahead if I hadn't bought this house and stayed in this condo that I had before this house. That I hated this condo. I hated it so much, but it was so cheap. And it's just funny how that goes, right? And so I have to remember, like, no, I love my house, and it's okay that I bought it and it's not necessarily making me money, but it is making me happy. And I just repeat that to myself. So I really want to know, how close you guys are to reaching financial independence, and then what the other side looks like for you. What would your kind of day-to-day life be like? And what are some things that you're doing now that you would do more of or less of?
Okay. Well, I did the numbers for this month, and we are actually at Coast Fire if Carl or Carl, because he's older than me, works till he's 65. That is not our plan. We want to be completely retired earlier than that. But that is nice to know that if we just want to go part-time, that we do not have to invest another dime and we will be fine by the time we turn 65. Our goal is to probably completely retire by 59. I do not see us working after 59 when we can start withdrawing. Carl just got lucky and enough he works like a full-time job and then like a couple side gigs, like doing veterinarian work. So he was working like 5 to 6 days a week. And now his Friday side gig has dropped off. So he's actually off every Friday now, which means we're going in the right direction. And we're able to do that without being like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do without that money? So I would say we're Coast Fire, but we're aiming to get closer to financial independence sooner.
Yeah. So Carl, what about you? What does reaching FI look like for you? How close would you say you are, and what does life look like on the other side for you?
So originally, I wanted to be completely retired and be able to never have to go back to work, but that has definitely changed here in the last couple of years. I mean, I've found much more peace in my day to day work. I mean, I've always loved it at its core, but I'm much more comfortable now. So my type of FI is the more coast FI, where I can go work a couple of days a week and maintain a pretty good lifestyle. And maybe not 2 days a week every week, but now we have all these options where maybe I can work full time for a few months, take a few months off, and do some pretty non traditional things, do some travel, maybe homeschool my kid for a little while we go overseas. I just like having those options. It's much more peaceful knowing that we've reached that point.
Your skill set is something that you have to go to a lot of schooling for and is highly desirable. Would you say that you would still want to use your veterinary skills in retirement, like say volunteering at a rescue or anything like that? Or would you want to just be done with veterinary work completely afterwards?
I never see myself being completely done. I will either use it to make money or to basically give back to the community. I would be heartbroken if I completely quit. That is not in the future.
It's amazing to have a job like that. You're very lucky. And I'm curious, like what changed in the last year or so? I think you mentioned where your job was more tolerable, and like what led to the burnout before that?
A lot of things. I'm very introverted. And so that's one reason I became a veterinarian. Who doesn't love animals? But I think a lot of it is you're not dealing with the animals. You are talking to people all day long. So I think it was a combination of that and doing your job. It was just a lot of work. The main thing I think was the late nights, the all nights. At first, I was doing all animals, which is very hard to do. I know there's a lot of veterinarians, hopefully not a whole lot, who are listening to me right now who would beg to differ, but for me, it was very difficult. So each step I took forward, I was doing more streamlined work. Like right now, I work on dogs and cats during the day, and I'm much more comfortable in how I practice, and it's much more peaceful. And so I'm no longer running away from it. I'm using it to try. It's going to be a part of the life I design. I never want to leave it.
That's great. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I'm very excited for both of you. It sounds like your FI life is kicking off to be a great start. And yeah, Coast FI is also one of the things I want to try to do. I'd love to go down to part-time work and like find something I'm more passionate about. My master's degree was in art history, so not exactly the top dollar salary type of deal, but I'd love to go back to it, once I reach a point where I no longer have to give to my retirement accounts, which by the way, for the audience, if you don't know what Coast FI is, it basically means that your living expenses are low enough that part-time work can cover your expenses, but your retirement accounts are fat enough or have enough money in them that once you reach 65, you will have plenty of money to take a traditional retirement. So basically, all you need is a job to cover your daily expenses, and you don't need to save money in retirement anymore. So it's a really great kind of middle ground to completely retiring early or retiring traditionally. And I think a lot of people now are kind of going down that route because of the fact that we're passionate about our jobs, like you are, Carl, and want to keep that in our lives, but don't want to do it, 40, 50, 60, 90 hours a week, depending on what kind of job you have. And personally, just as a side note, I just don't think humans are cut out for that kind of work. Even 40 hours, I feel like, is a lot for a human brain to function well on. And especially in this day and age where productivity is just seen as the be all end all of everything. And my partner and I, even just this morning, were talking about how everybody seems to have ADD all of a sudden. And I'm like, I don't think we have ADD. I think we're in a world where our brains are having trouble adjusting to the amount of information we're getting, the amount of things we have to do all the time and things we have to care about and things we have to be responsible for. And so our brains are like, what the heck am I supposed to focus on right now? And I'm like, that's not ADD. That's just our society ruining us. So anyway, a bit of a tangent there, but yeah, I love that that's the path you're going to go on, because I think it's a big one in our community. So thanks for sharing that with us. Okay, so I want to switch a little bit to what your current wins and struggles are right now. So let's start with your current struggles. And they don't have to necessarily be FI related. They can be anything you want to talk about. But if they are FI related, if they're affecting your timeline or your journey at all, feel free to expand upon that.
I feel like that some of our FI struggles or struggles in general is just there's so many options. Now that we've created our life, I think we live like 20 dream lives. We walk our driveway a lot. And every time I'm coming up with a different scenario of what I want to be doing in 10 years. Do I want to go back to work? Do I want to go abroad? Do I want to downsize into a tiny home? Do I want to flip houses? What do we want to do if we have all these options because we've set ourselves up to have these options?
I love that you said that, because I was like, I thought it was only me, because it feels like so many people know exactly the path they want to be on, right? And I'm like, there are so many things that I can do and I can't do all of them. So thank you for saying that. Continue.
Yes, that is probably, and like I said, like you were saying about the ADD thing, that like hit home, because I'm like, I have ADD because I don't know what I want to do. Like, 1 minute I'm saying, let's take off and move somewhere. And then the next minute I'm like, no, we got to stay right here. We're going to stay right here for the next 40 years. I'm like, we're moving to Portugal. And then he's like, oh, okay. And then the next week I'm like, no, we are going to stay here and we're going to live in this house for the rest of our lives. So that is my biggest struggle, is trying to figure out, because we have all these options, what path are we going to take?
Oh my God, I hear you so hard, especially the Portugal part. Because seriously, like, I feel like everybody's moving to Portugal and it looks like so much fun. And sometimes I'm like, hey, Chris, it's my partner's name. Do you want to move to Portugal? And he's like, no. And so he helps guide the path a little bit more. So that's nice. Carl, what would you say your current struggles are right now?
I agree with Carla about too many options, but I think that's a good thing. I don't think that's a major struggle. I think that's a blessing. Some typical struggles. I mean, the girls are getting older and it's hitting home that they're costing a little bit more than anticipated, especially with some higher level sports and things like that. And so kind of having to readjust a little bit there with the numbers. And then one thing is, I mean, just kind of some peer pressure from friends and family, just to, why aren't you living your means, not under your means? Like, why aren't you living in a nice subdivision, things like that? But we're people pleasers. And so that does affect us. Still sticking to my guns with the five things.
It's amazing how, keeping up with the Joneses so enmeshed in our society that people are so uncomfortable when somebody chooses to live a different way that they call it out, because I feel like there's probably some sort of insecurity in themselves that they're like, wait, this is how we're supposed to live. Why aren't you living this way? And I just find that so interesting. It makes me just want to be like, why do you feel this way to them? Why do they feel the need to even tell you how you should live your life? I'm very curious about that. But I love that you're sticking to your guns, because you said you're a people pleaser. But when you said that, I was like, are you? Because you're still living in that house and you're doing what you want to do. And so, you're not pleasing anybody but yourself. So good job. So let's switch to your current wins that you have going on right now. Again, FI, not FI related. It doesn't matter. Whatever you want to share with the community, something that you're really proud of that you're winning at in life right now.
Some of our wins are, I get to stay at home, which seems like in this day and age is very hard for a family, especially a family of 5, to live on one income, even if it is a higher income. And our son goes to a private preschool, and he goes there from 8 to 12 during school time. And it has really been a blessing that I get to stay at home and get to focus on the house. And our rental house pays our mortgage, so we've eliminated that bill. And because of all that, Carl can step back and not work on Fridays. And those are some really big wins with us, just getting to push on the brakes, not completely stop, but just slow down a little bit. Because there for a while, I felt like he was never home. I worked, I loved my job, but it is a blessing to be able to stay at home for a couple years or forever. It's the options.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And yeah, what you said about 5 people living on one income is just very poignant, because you're right. In this day and age, when inflation is going crazy and everything seems to cost more, and I know everybody says the economy is doing really well, but I feel like our personal economies are different from like the macro economy of the country, and that it can really differ depending on where you live, what your job is, what your situation is. And so, yeah, I agree with being able to stay home. And like you said, being a mother is your number one priority, and being able to embrace that calling is incredible. And I love that for you. I'm so happy you guys can do that. And so, Carl, what are your current wins right now?
So like Carla said, I feel like for the past few years, really the past 4 years, I've been really on the gas with working. I mean, 5-6 days a week between my contract job and my relief work. And so here recently, I've really felt more comfortable scaling it back. And so this summer has been a change, and I've been taking much more days off, and it has felt really good. Got to go to Six Flags and do some fun stuff. So that's the latest win.
You guys are giving me all the nostalgia. I loved going to Six Flags in the summertime. I'm sure Brad, if he's listening right now, wants to know which roller coasters you guys went on so he can share it with his daughter. Brad from Choose FI, by the way, audience loves to talk about roller coasters, if you didn't know that.
I did know he was a roller coaster enthusiast, and I don't know if he's been to Six Flags over Georgia, but we have a lot of good ones here. Goliath is one of the tallest. I would highly recommend that one. They have a bit of a comic theme. They have the Batman, and it's called the Mind Bender, but technically the Joker, and then the Superman. So, Brad, if you haven't been down here, give it a go.
Yeah, for sure. You heard it here first, Brad. Cool. Thank you so much for sharing that with me. And we're coming towards the end of our time here, but I really want to leave our audience with some recommendations, learnings, or life hacks you guys might have, because I feel like each of us has something that we've learned in our life that the community can take and use and take action on. So, Carla, let me know what your life hack recommendation or learning is.
So I would say enjoy the journey. Sometimes I have to really sit back and be like, all right, it's okay if we go on that 8-night cruise. It's okay if we do this, because we need to enjoy our children and each other right now. That's been a really, I would say, after we've been married and been, really going hard on the FI journey, our dating life, us getting to spend alone time has really scaled back. So I'm really working really hard to try to spend more one-on-one time with Carl. And another important thing is, pay pretty much the same kind of thing, but pay yourself of the things that you want. Really think about your priorities and what is important to you. A good example is like shopping. Like, I don't want to go shopping because I am a spender and I will spend money, but if I don't go, I won't spend. And that stuff I bring home is not important.
Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah, thank you so much. Carl, what about you?
As far as hacks, I would say marry the right person. That's the biggest one. And I will say I got the better end of our deal in our marriage. So that's the biggest one. I could not be on this path without having found Carla. She already had the house. She already had it in her nature. That was the most important thing.
Yeah, that's a really great one. And it's something that I've heard before too, because I know that when you marry the right person and they share your financial life, that is how you can get so much further, especially if you have their support and you have that open communication, like you said. And if they've already got a house you can move into, that's just really the gravy on top. I love that. And I feel the same. I feel like my journey is so much further along because I found Chris. And he has been like my rock and vice versa. For example, just as a short tangent, he decided to quit his job because it was burning him out and so toxic that he was like, I'm done. And he was not getting paid what he was worth. He was getting paid like 30 grand under what he was worth. And so he was like, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. And he's going to take a break. And he was like, is this okay? And I'm like, yeah. When you have that person that you can just trust 100% with everything about yourself, including your money, it goes so much further. And it's so much easier than doing it by yourself. So we are pretty much at the end here. Is there anything you want to leave the audience with before we sign off? And is there any way that people can reach out to you if they want to learn more, hear about more of your story, or just chat with you?
Yeah, we're not big on social media. We both have Facebook. I have one. Carl has one. We also did go to Camp FI. So Carl and I have been to Camp FI, and I know that never got brought up, but that was very important to us. We went last January, and it technically is the only time we have both spent away from our 2-year-old. We did it for Camp FI.
Did you go to the one that was in Florida, the Southeast, I think?
Yeah, January of 2023.
Awesome. And was it your first one?
And only.
What do you think? Did you like it? Do you want to go back?
Yes. We wanted to go back this past January. We just couldn't make it work. I hope we can go back. We thought about going more out west and going to one that's a little bit different, knowing that we've already been to one of them. We'll see. But yes, that community was very helpful. They're all my Facebook friends now. And I love following them because if it wasn't for them, I would be the one that was probably slipping more. But instead, I'm like, oh no, they're doing it. We got to do this. Do you see where they're going? Carl, we got to get to where we can travel more.
It was very nice seeing the real people who were doing this, and it's not just people on the internet. So that was very important for us.
Which our family did thought we were going to a cult.
Yeah, we did make fun of just a little bit by the family saying we drank some Kool-Aid. So
yes, I have heard that. I mean, I make the joke that we're cult light. And yeah, I really hear you that it's so nice to see it and experience it in person. And I wish we could do that so much more often. And this is one of the reasons why I started this podcast is like, I'm like, I want to hear more about these people that I'm meeting for only a couple of days. I went to the Camp FI Mid-Atlantic back in May and did a live recording there with another podcast host who was there. And there's so many people to meet. I think there was like 120 people there, and you can't meet and hear everybody's story for several hours. It's just not possible. And so I was like, how can I possibly hear more people's stories? Oh, okay. I found a problem. I'm going to be the solution to that problem and create a podcast and interview people. And then I was like worried that nobody would want to come on because people get nervous to come on and talk about their money. Like a lot of people thought, oh, were you going to talk about like salaries and like things like that? I'm like, no, I don't care. I don't care about salaries. I don't care about savings rates. Like you can discuss that with whoever you want, but I want to know your actual life story and like what brought you on this journey and why you want to do it and what your money history is. I don't care about salary. I don't care about savings rate. That's going to be different for everybody. And I feel like it can cause a little bit of comparison, and comparison is the thief of joy. And so I didn't want to create that on my podcast. And so I'm hoping, and this is my plea to anybody out there who has been considering being on the podcast, that please come on. We want to hear your story. We will not talk about numbers. Don't worry. And you can be anonymous if you want to be. So anyway, thank you, Carl and Carla, for coming on. This was an excellent conversation and I loved having you. And yeah, I hope to bring you back on maybe in a year or two. We can see where your journey is from there. And then you'll have teenagers. We'll see how that affects the budget.
Oh, yeah.
It sure will.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks for listening to the EverydayFI podcast. If you're loving the show, here are some things you can do. Number 1, subscribe in your favorite podcast player and share the show with your friends and family. Number 2, please leave a review. I'm always looking for ways to improve the show. Number 3, check out my website, EverydayFI.com, where you can listen to all the episodes and leave comments for myself and the guest. Number 4, if you're interested in sharing your own financial independence story, you can find a submission form at everyday-fi.com/podcast. And finally, number 5, join my Patreon membership for only $5 a month at patreon.com/everydayfi podcast. This is a one-woman show, so every little bit counts. See you next time as we continue to go down the path to financial freedom.